You know, when I was a kid, Easter was like a big deal. I remember going to church. I remember some old white guy in a long dress sprinkling water in my face. At least I hope it was water. The people walking around with palm leaves and somebody rubbing ash on your forehead and stuff like that. So obviously you could tell I was raised Catholic. I didn't understand what any of it meant, of course, and come to find out in my adult years, I don't think a lot of Christians actually understand what any of that stuff meant too. But Easter's coming up. And I was just thinking about what is the greatest claim that Christians make. It's not the virgin birth, it's not miracles or parables, it's not even his death on the cross, it's his resurrection. The resurrection is probably the single most important aspect of the Christian claim. So we're going to take a look at that today. The question is, first question, who saw Jesus first after he was risen? Just a little bit of background information here before we look at the four different gospel stories of the post-resurrection story. If you look at them chronologically in the order that they were written, the epistles that you see after the Gospels and in the book of Acts, most of those were actually written in the 50s AD, 20, 30, 40 years before the Gospels were written. So that's our earliest record of any Christian literature. So if you open up your Bible to the end there where the letters are and you open it up to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verse 4, the Apostle Paul says that Jesus appeared to Cephas, which is actually Peter's Greek name, Peter the Apostle. And then to the 12. Stop right there again. How could Jesus appear to the 12 if Judas hung himself? And don't say, well, it could have been the new disciple, Matthias, that they voted in. Because that happened more than 40 days after. Okay? And then it says he also appeared to 500, and then to James, and then to the apostles, and then to Paul himself. There's no mention of Mary in there. But now let's look at the four gospel stories. It might surprise you to know that Mark's gospel was actually written before Matthew. But it's flipped. So they placed Matthew first and Mark. But it might interest you to know that the post-resurrection story in Mark's gospel did not exist at the time of its writing. But anyway, they had to tack on the post-resurrection story in Mark. Everything after verse 8. The last verse says, the women left the tomb and ran away trembling and bewildered, and in their fear they did not say a word to anybody. And that was the end of Mark's gospel. And then they wrote Matthew, Luke, Acts, and then John finally. Anyway, Matthew's gospel says that the first ones to go to the tomb was Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. And there's guards there, and there's an earthquake, which isn't in the other stories. But anyway, in Matthew's gospel, after the earthquake and the guards faint and everything, the tomb is empty. An angel says, hey, look, you're looking for Jesus. He's not here. Go tell the guys to meet him in Galilee. And they run away from the tomb in fear and great joy. So in this version, they have great joy. They're not only afraid. Suddenly, Jesus meets them on the way to see the disciples, and they grasp onto him. Okay, so now we go to Luke's gospel, and we have a completely different story. They don't see, there's no guards, there's no earthquake. They go to the tomb, and this time there's a bunch of different women that are going to the tomb, and they go back and they tell the disciples that the tomb is empty, but they don't see Jesus on the way back, because it says Peter goes to look at the tomb for himself, and he finds the tomb empty just like the women did, and he scratches his head wondering what happened. And then it says later on, the same day, two of the disciples are going to a village called Emmaus, and that's when Jesus sidles up next to him and says, hey guys, what are you talking about? And he's disguised. They don't know who he is at first. So we have like three different stories now. We have one story saying it was Peter, another story saying it was Mary Magdalene, Another one's saying it was Mary and another woman. This one's saying that it was Mary and a bunch of different women. And nobody believed the women because it sounded like nonsense to them. Well, of course, because it is nonsense. And then in John's Gospel, we have a completely different story. This time it's only Mary that goes to the tomb. And she sees that the stone's been moved away and it's empty. So she runs back and she tells Peter and the other disciple, there's like two of them, I guess. And she says, look, they've taken the Lord out of our tomb and we don't know where they've put him. So what's going on here? In Matthew, they're meeting Jesus on the way to tell the disciples, and they're happy, and they're touching him and everything. And in John's Gospel, it's just Mary. She finds nobody. She tells the disciples. They go back to look for themselves. And they don't see Jesus either. And then they leave. And Mary's sitting there crying. And then Jesus appears to her in the form of a gardener or something like that. And she tells her, don't touch me because I haven't ascended yet. But this is crazy because if that's a big deal to be touched before he's ascended, why is he going over to the other disciples' house and telling Thomas to stick his finger in the hole to prove that he's real? I don't know. I don't believe in any of it. It's nonsense. Hope you have a nice day.